everybody, Tekking 1001 here. It has been a very long time, I know, since the last episode of Divine Comedy. It's been, I think, since the beginning of March is the last one I did. And, I'm almost done with it, too, so I really, I'm sorry for that. It's just, you know, stuff got in the way. But we're back now. We're going to be doing the last episode, episode 8, which is going to be wrapping up Purgatorio, the Ascension on the Mountain, and then we're going to end with Dante ascending off into heaven. So, last time, I believe we ended with Dante leaving Wrath, which is the area of misdirected love. You had too much love. It was just towards stuff that was not good, like wrath and pride and lust. Not lust. Envy. Yeah, envy. I'm trying to remember the Full Metal Alchemist homunculi. That's how I remember. So now we enter its own little subsection itself, which is deficient love. It's the only one here is Sloth. It's kind of in its own special category. It's where you didn't have any, you were neutral. And as we've seen from Hell, and as we've seen from actually a lot of poetry from this time period, and even up to really Shakespeare's time period, neutrality is always a bad thing. You have to pick a side. It's either good or bad. If you pick neutrality, sometimes you're even punished more than you would if you pick the bad side. I don't know what it is with poems. It's just like, I actually asked this question to my English professor, not professor, it was my English teacher in high school. And I was in advanced English in high school, and we actually, that's where I first read Inferno, was in that class. And I asked my teacher, I'm like, well, what's with, you know, like, why do they always punish you on neutrality? I mean, you're lazy, sure, that's a bad thing, but why exactly are you punished more than if you were to, like, do some, you know, heinous act? And the answer she gave me was, it's not really an act of laziness. It's not just like, it's not just like that. It's more of about the inability to take action. It's just where you don't take action on certain events. And I'm probably phrasing this way wrong than the way she put up. It was over 2 years ago. But it's more to it than just being lazy. It's more than just that. It's more than just like, you know, there's a deed that needs to be done and you're just laying on your couch eating Cheetos. It's something that goes beyond that. So as you can imagine from the punishment of the slothful, they are trapped in constant motion, so they are constantly running around and doing some sort of activity, very similar to how the sinners were punished on the vestibule of hell, how the vestibule was also in terms of, was also neutrality, but the way I think the reason they got sent to hell, or at least the vestibule of hell anyway, was it became a greater mortal sin, because you have to commit a mortal sin to go to hell. So it's kind of like this. It's like there are people that had a very strong sin of lust that go to hell. That's when it ran their lives. They lived their lives by lust. These are the people that live their lives by neutrality. That's like if you were a king. If you were a king and you were like Switzerland. He's like, oh no, we're not getting involved in that. We're not getting involved in that. We're just going to have a nice neutral rule. If you lived your life by it, then you get sent to hell for it. But like as we stated with Purgatory, any sin that you have, any kind of, anything that was not purged before you die, you have to go to Purgatory and you have to purge it. So these are those, not as bad as the people that got sent to the vestibule, but they still had that slothful nature. So they're constantly running around, and I believe here that I have my little cheat sheet here. The opposite of the sin of sloth would be zeal. The angel of zeal would be their guide here, and they don't really have a prayer in this one. Their prayer is that the labor is their prayer. So basically they'll learn it just by running around and just kind of lamenting their own existence and like why they chose to live a life of neutrality when there was so much stuff they could do. Like, what sloth seems like one of the 7 deadly sins. You kind of got to wonder like why we would, because like lust and envy and greed, those things, they require action. They require you go out and do stuff. Sloth is just, I can't see living your life by sloth or having too much sloth. I mean, that's just like, it's life. You're supposed to do stuff. That's the great thing about life. You were granted this amazing gift by God, and you should go and enjoy it. So that's sloth. It's a very short one. It's the I think it's the shortest canto in Purgatorio. It might be the shortest canto in the Divine Comedy, but I know it's the shortest one in Purgatorio. So after leaving the area of the Sloth, they begin their ascent, and night falls for the second time on Mount Purgatory. As we stated previously, you cannot climb the mountain while it's darkness out, so you have to. So Dante and Virgil stop here, and Dante dreams of a siren. He dreams of a a soul-sucking succubus demon that draws him close with her song before Virgil appears in his dream, rips her freaking wide open, and the stench of her bowels awaken Dante from his sleep. Okie dokie. Okay, so we move on to the terraces of excessive love. The love that you had it, you just had a little bit too much of it. So the first one is the covetous or the prideful. I mean, not the covetous, the greed or the avarice. They have greed has so many different words, like covetous or avarice. There was one edition of Purgatorio that I read previously that just referred to it as greed. This one right here on the internet right now refers to it as covetous, and this edition I'm reading right now, which is the Penguin Classic edition, which is probably my favorite edition, has refers to it as avarice. So, you know, thesauruses are fun. I guess they didn't have. I guess they had they had an abundance of the word back in the old days. Then again, greed is probably one of the more popular sins back then. So, you know, I guess they would make sense why they would have a lot of words for it. Okay, so the covetous sin is to lie prostrate on the ground, face in the mud, and they are the angel of liberality. Liberality. Okay, their prayer is. Oh God, how am I? Ad heste pavimento. Angel of liberality would be their sin there, and I believe there was a more. I'm doing my cheat sheet here because I've read the Inferno. I know the Inferno quite well, but Purgatorio, and they kind of change all the rules around. Like I said earlier, Inferno is really simple. It's just you go down. There's a sin, there's the punishment for the sin, there's like a famous person. When we get into Purgatorio, we got like a bunch of complicated shit. We got a bunch of, consider it like a passage into heaven. When you're in hell, you're screwed either way. You're never getting out of hell. It's eternal, so it's much more streamlined is the process. Like, okay, well, Bill, you were a heretic, so go to level 6 and you get to scream inside of a buried alive coffin for all eternity. You know, very simple. When you get to heaven, it's kind of like, okay, so we got to purify you of your sins, so here's your prayer, here's your benediction, here's your angel that will be helping you as your guide, here's the thing you have to do in order to repent for your sin, here's the level you go on, like they shove a bunch of pamphlets into your face, I don't know. Oh, and if you look back, you get kicked off the mountain. You can't forget about that. Right. So, yeah, there was something else I wanted to mention here. Oh, wait. I think I know what it was. Wait, was this the one that, Oh, okay, yeah, this is what I wanted to mention. Okay, this is weird because Dante and Virgil, they meet a guy known as Hugh the Great. And Hugh the Great prophesizes stuff that has not happened yet. And this is where it gets interesting because remember, this is a work of fiction, but at the same time it greatly parallels stuff that really occurred in a non-fictional setting. Like we see popes and everything here that have actually existed. So don't look at the Divine Comedy from a fictional point. Look at more of it like a non-fiction with just some fictional elements to it, because this really does make sense, especially here because this Hugh the Great prophesizes stuff that is yet to occur. This is stuff that actually happens in real life. It's not like Dante was psychic when he was writing the poem. The poem is set, I believe, in the year 1300 or in the very early 1300s, and the events that he prophesizes occur after the year 1300, but before the actual date the poem was published. So basically, Dante, the writer Dante, sets the poem at a date. And it's around the same time he lived, but while through the process of writing it, he begins to prophesy stuff that Dante, in the context of the poem, would not know. So that's very interesting. And it's going to get into more philosophical and theological stuff when we get into heaven, when it comes to whole parallels with, you know, Dante's real life as a writer and exactly, you know, the inspirations that came to him and just the whole philosophical thing I'll get into after that. Or theological, one of the two. Alright, so, yeah. And the last thing to counter the sin of avarice, which would have been the scene of the birth of Christ from the Virgin Mary. So that's like the ultimate opposite of avarice. The humble birth of Christ, they put it. But humble birth of Christ, opposite of greed, and okay, whatever. I guess you can kind of call that. Because they're running out of opposites at this point. Alright, next up is the sixth Terrace, the gluttonous. And eat that turkey leg. Oh, yes. All right, you gotta love the gluttonous, because kind of going along with Sloth, where you lived your life with no action, or you just like did nothing. Gluttonous is an excessive love for food. And here's the thing with gluttony. Nowadays, gluttony it's still seen as bad. I mean, you don't want to be obese or anything, but think of it in the context of the Middle Ages. Think of it in the context of the 1300s. If you wanted food back then, you can't go down to Walmart and pick up some Lunchables, okay? You can't pick up some Lunchables and a nice big thing of milk or like a thing of like a 24-piece bread roll and get some butter and be like, oh man, this is awesome. You know, pick up a turkey for Thanksgiving dinner. No, if you wanted stuff back in the Middle Ages, you had to either kill it or grow it. I mean, in certain areas, in like major city-states and towns, you can go and just buy it. But if you're living out in a very rural community, it's either kill it or grow it. So, think of it in that context. Food is something that is very limited. And nowadays you can kind of argue that too, but really if you live in any kind of, first world country or anything, and you want food, it's pretty much made available to you as long as you have money. But back then that's not the case. Food is in very short supply. So, if you're this one dude that's eating more than his fair share, everyone else is going to look at you and say, hey, buddy, you might want to try to pace yourself here, or else we're just going to have to kill you and eat your, bulbous figure for Thanksgiving supper. So I suggest you ease up a little bit on the turkey, So, makes sense why gluttony would be this punished. Alright, so here, starvation. That's a simple one, right? If you want to go into heaven, you're a glutton, you kind of have to starve yourself. That would imply that they would have to stay on the Terrace for quite some time, I believe, to starve. I mean, if we're going by the same physics as if you were a regular human, then you'd be stuck on that one Terrace for a good month before you start to really starve to death. But I guess that's kind of like a Toriko thing. If you guys read Toriko, there's a scene in the Bubble Fruit arc where Toriko literally is almost starving to death, and he has to appreciate, he's like, I love all the food in the world, no matter what, and then he almost dies, because you can't die, you're already dead. You're already dead. So yeah, that makes sense. The prayer here is Labia me Domine, and the Angel of Temperance would be Temperance. Okay, that makes sense. Angel of Temperance. They use an example here of John the Baptist, who apparently lived on nothing but locusts and honey. Don't really know exactly how that's how historically accurate that is, but it does come from Matthew 3:4. But therefore it has to be true because my name is Matthew. Actually, I do have. Actually, I wonder if it's in here. Yes, it is. Copy of the New Testament. Alright, copy of the New Testament. Let's check this, see if this is actually... I'm going to look this up here. Copy of the New Testament. I got this way back in second grade. I'm surprised I still have it. Alright, let's see here. Matthew chapter 3, verse 4. Great guy. Matthew, great guy. Alright, verse 4. Now John himself was clothed in camel's hair with a leather belt around his waist, and his food was locusts and wild honey. Kind of curious how he got the wild honey, but I don't think that would have worked out because I'm terrified of any kind of stinging insect. So, props to Apostle Matthew. He could get it done. All right, so moving on to the last and seventh terrace of Mount Purgatory is the lustful. They get set on fire. Get it? Burning lust of, you're burning lust in your body for the opposite sex, or in the same sex. I'll get to that, they mention that. But also, they get set on fire. So basically how it goes is the seventh terrace is pretty much just set aflame, and upon entering it, in order to pass through it and finally be cleansed of all your sins, because it's the seventh terrace, it's also the smallest, because it's like a funnel shape, cone shape, it slowly gets thinner the higher up you get on the mountain. So last terrace would be obviously the shortest to go around in a perfect circle ascend. So it's probably the least punished sin, as I stated, mostly because lust is something, it's just human beings are driven to want to propagate the species. Now, it was not viewed the same way back then, because back then, remember, we now know that we were evolved from, well, I'm not going to get into an evolution argument here because there's somebody out there that'll probably disagree with me, but we now know that we're more similar to other animals on the planet. Back then, creationism was rampant. It's, God, reached down, created Adam, Adam spawned Eve from one of Eve spawned from Adam from one of his ribs, and we're completely separate from all the other animals on the world, and we should be a better example. Of course, now we know that we have, like we know about sex drives and everything, but I think even the Dante writing this kind of assumed that, the sin of lust is not as bad as, like, for example, the sin of pride or greed, which you really have choices in making. Lust is something you really don't have a choice in the end of the day. But it was a different time period, so it makes sense. They go into they have souls repenting the misdirected sexual desires of either both heterosexual and homosexual. They're at least fair with that. It's not like homosexuals have to go through some extra punishment. Anyone that had a misdirected, excessive love for lust, so you both have the same punishment. And how it basically goes, and this is kind of funny, is in order to get to the earthly paradise, Virgil and Dante need to walk through a wall of fire. How the sinners do it is when they walk through the fire, I believe they sing the prayer while, walking through the fire, or they sing the hymn, Samuel de Clemente, God of the Supreme Clemency. I butchered that really hard. But the funny thing here is, we have Dante, who just enters the Seventh Terrace, notices that it's on fire, and he's like, looking over at Virgil. Virgil's looking at him, and he's like, "You're almost done." Oh, hell to the no! So Virgil has to kind of coerce Dante to walk through fire, which everything in his body is telling him not to do. But eventually he's confronted by the poets of Guido Gonanzi, Gazelle, and Annetta Danielle, which Dante speaks to, and I guess through that and through Virgil's coercion, they actually convince him to walk through the fire, and he goes through the fire, and because they remind him of Beatrice. They remind him of Beatrice, who is the angel that was mentioned at the beginning of the beginning of the Divine Comedy, who Dante met, and how she is supposed to be like. The way it's presented here is because real life Dante that wrote the Divine Comedy, Beatrice was a major inspiration to him to write this. So when he uses Beatrice in the sense of the novel, Dante in the novel respects her as the angel, but the person writing it, Dante, the actual poet, that was his inspiration. That's like one of my like inspirational figures, was the angel Beatrice. So this is what I say when it has great parallels between real life and the fictional, Purgatorio in here. So, that makes sense. So he reminds them of Beatrice, and he eventually passes through the fire. After he passes through the fire, it is now almost it's nighttime again on Purgatory for the third night of Purgatory. So they have to rest on the Ascension before they get to the earthly paradise. So lastly, the last section is the very peak of Mount Purgatory the next morning, which is the earthly paradise, or if you want to refer to it as the Garden of Eden, it is in fact the Garden of Eden. It represents all the innocent of mankind that existed before Adam and Eve became, Eve ate the apple and doomed all of mankind. Thanks, Eve. Yeah, so this is like this one scrap of innocence that remains. It is here that Beatrice, well actually, before Beatrice, Dante meets a woman named Matilda. And this is where the Divine Comedy, in terms of accuracy, kind of is jumbled around between scholars, because some believe Matilda is Matilda of Tuscany. Others believe she's not really, she's more of just a dream figure from an earlier canto. So it's just, I don't really care either way, because I'm not a religious buff. I'm not like I'm not into the history on this sort of thing and biblical mythology or anything, but it's just a little bit of debate there of who she is. And basically her job is to prepare Dante for meeting Beatrice, and Beatrice finally does show up, and this is the first time I believe well, no, not the first time, but this is like a legit angel. So she's very radiant, she's very beautiful, introduces herself to Dante, and but because of the appearance of Beatrice and like her entrance and everything, it's kind of epic. It kind of covers up the fact, or helps transition from the fact that Virgil is no more he's not around anymore. And this is because Virgil he lived in the time of the Roman Empire. He lived in the time before Christianity, before any of that. He represents human reason at its peak. And like he stated to Dante at the beginning of the Divine Comedy, I can carry you through hell and purgatory, but after that, paradise, heaven, that is the abode of God. I lived before the time of Christianity. I represent human reason, and I'm not a Christian. I don't have any place there. My abilities, I have no power in heaven because I don't exist there. Human reason, when we get into that plane of existence, it gets very metaphysical, it gets very confusing, it gets very, physics are pretty much just bent, the logic of life and like the meaning of being one with the universe, it gets very, very intense, so human reason is hard to comprehend it, and even reading Paradiso at certain points, I found it hard to comprehend. Even reading the freaking Cliff Notes, I found it hard to comprehend. But we'll get to there. Two things Dante does before leaving the Garden of Paradise, the Garden of Eden, is he passes through the river Leith, which removes all the bad memories of sins that he committed throughout his life. Because remember, Purgatory's main purpose is to purge you of your sins, which Dante reflects back onto what they were and sees how much he's changed since his pilgrimage, and he drinks of the river, passes through the river Leith, and that kind of washes all of his sins away, or the memories of the sins, and then he drinks of the river Enyo, which grants him the ability of restoring all the good memories he had in his life. So, he drinks this, and pretty much every good memory that he's had kind of floods to the surface and just gives him this really warm and fuzzy feeling. So, now he's ready to go to heaven. He's ready to go to paradise. So, last canto, I'll actually read it here just for some impact here. Oh, there was a map in here the whole time. Alright. I'll start from here. Okay. Reader, if I had a space to write more words, I'd sing, at least in part, of that sweet draught which never had satisfied my thirst. But now I have completed every page, planned for my poem's second canticle. I am checked by the brittle of my art. From those holiest waters I return to her reborn, a tree renewed, in bloom with newborn foliage, immaculate, eager to rise, now ready for the stars. And of course, the canto ends with stars, just like the previous and the subsequent one that will follow. It will also end in the word stars, which is you could look up a whole different comparison of symbolism, what the word stars means. But yeah, so you can see how Dante writes. That's like a direct canto, that's a direct verse. He puts himself into, like, he'll refer to it in the third person of, like, breaking the fourth wall, sort of how he does it. So yeah, it's just, so yeah, Dante is completely purified now. He's purified of all of his sins, and he could really just go about his life now being pure, but being like washed away and knowing what his sins were and overcoming them. But now he's going to the next level. He's going to paradise, and this is a completely different thing than the last two. The last two cantos were all about sinners either being punished or sinners being purged of their sins. Now it's to go to the area where there is no punishment, there is no sin. It's just all... There are levels of heaven. And you might wonder, if everything is happy, if everything is happiness, how come there are levels of heaven? Shouldn't there just be this one place where everyone is just getting along and everyone's just all happy and warm and fuzzy? Well, the thing here is, it's not about happiness, because even in the lowest level of heaven, which are referred to as spheres, even in the lowest level of heaven, there is still an incredible amount of happiness. Like you're still happier than anywhere you would be on purgatory, hell, and on earth. The thing about heaven is, it's not about the level of happiness. It's the level of oneness you are with God, and the oneness you are with the center of the universe. And the more concentric you get up in the spheres, because they represent the planets, and the further you go up in the spheres, the closer you get to the center of the universe. And when you get to the highest circle, into the abode of God himself, which we'll actually get to that in the next canto, Dante's physical representation of what God looks like. Look forward to that. And so yeah, that's really what heaven's more about. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. This is Divine Comedy Ended Purgatory, part number 8. So next time, hopefully we'll get through heaven in 2 parts. So yeah, thanks for everyone for watching. Hopefully I'll get the next one out not too late. So yeah, Tekking 101, 1001 signing out. See you guys.